and there's absolutely something that's there, where you have to go through it anyway, you might as well find something useful out of it. So for example, say you're in your math class, and you hate your math class, not your English class, your math class. So because you hate your math class, you start to look up at the ceiling, and you're counting the number of squares in the ceiling because you're so bored, and it's so painful that you're going to want to take your mind someplace else just so that you can get around this. Now, typically think about it. Do we hate a class when we understand what's going on and we've mastered the subject? Not usually. Usually we don't like the class because we don't understand what's going on in it. And there can be a number of reasons that we don't like what's going on. There could be a number of reasons that we don't understand what's going on. Maybe we like the subject so little that we pay so little attention and therefore we're lost in it. Or maybe it is that we just don't understand it and that's why we get bored with it. But whatever the reason is, we should think about it. You've got to be in the class anyway. You know, you're there. Is that really the best use of your time? You just stare at the squares and count them off and all that. I mean, you might as well get something out of it. You might as well get something out of it because it's going to take up so many hours of your life every single week. And then you can think, well, then I just won't go. Well, then, yeah, but then you fall behind on all the work. And then all that does is just multiply your problems. So now not only is it a boring class, and not only is it a class that you're wasting time not getting anything out of, but moreover, now you're even further behind. Because what's going to end up happening is that you're going to retake the class in some other capacity. So now you're going to be twice as bored, going through, struggling twice as much to go through it. And then when you make up that class, it's probably going to be at some really inconvenient time. You're probably going to make it up during a vacation or after hours or something like that. So what I'm saying is that if you're there, you might as well get something out of it. Maybe it's a passing grade, then you can kind of save yourself all that other suffering. Or maybe it's just to somehow make the class interesting and useful. I had I think I told you before, I had a geography class one time in college. And the professor was a really strange guy. He used to lecture, and he would hold his hands like this as he talked. And he would move his hands around like this. He looked kind of like a Disney villain, you know? He'd always rub his hands together. And the class was just supposed to be about geography, just physical geography. Where is Paris? Where is Los Angeles? And then and then some issues around that. It wasn't a history class or anything. And this guy made it a very political class. He talked a lot about politics. And it turns out that he had run for office before and all that. The class was very difficult. It was very difficult. He indicated to us that he wrote the tests so that he could probably score an A or an A- on it. In other words, he made them so difficult that a guy who was supposed to be teaching this stuff as a professor would barely score an A. So you can imagine what that did to the other students in the class. Most of the students in the class were failing. And college is not like high school. If you get a C in college, that's almost like failing. If you get a D, you get to retake it and all that. And it gets very expensive. You're having to retake classes, and then that takes up all your time, and it's challenging. So anyway, he would sit up there and just talk about about geography. And then all of a sudden he'd go off about something political, and the students would get furious and start arguing with him because not only were they failing the class, were not doing well in the class, regardless of how hard they worked, but piled on top of that they're paying for it. They're probably going to have to retake it because you needed the class to transfer. And then also this professor was talking about stuff that had nothing to do with the subject. He was talking about politics, and the politics were completely contrary to most of the students in the class. This is not a good learning environment. And so what I did for most of the semester was sit there and agree with the professor. Anyway, I didn't care I had no interest in politics whatsoever. But I would sit there and agree with the professor and go, that's right, and you tell them. Why do you suppose I did that?
To get a good grade.
To get a good grade? Yeah, on the better side. I had no interest in getting a good grade.
Oh.
And he was not the kind of person whose good side I want to be on. I was just, what else am I going to do in the class? I had to be there anyway. I wasn't going to learn much, so what do? You start stirring the pot. That's right, Professor. You going to let him get away with that? The crap he's talking up there? And this guy, and the more I'd back him up on it. Now, what's interesting is that the students seemed to know what I was doing. They thought it was funny, and I would, whatever the professor said, I would kind of say the same thing that he just said, but go further on it. Like, for example, he would talk about how we needed he would say something to the effect of, we need to eliminate all cases of welfare and remove people from this country who are taking from the system. You stand on top like this. And I'll say, that includes old people on Social Security. Don't you think we should execute old people when they get to be a certain age so we have to pay out Social Security, or maybe make some accidents happen? And other people in the class, they knew I was just taking whatever he said and going to the absurd end of it. And he would say, well, no, I wouldn't go that far. You're a little more out there than I am. And I'd say, that's just because you're not committed to really saving money. Things like that. Everybody else knew what was going on. And it was funny as hell. It was entertaining. Because then, students would get so mad they'd storm out of class. That was his last semester there, by the way. When you go to college, toward the end of the semester, they ask the students what they thought of the professor, and you fill out questionnaires, and you rate the professor. And they take those ratings very seriously when they decide whether to hire someone or not hire someone. So his ratings were so low that he didn't get hired back. But I had a lot of fun in the class. About 3/4 of the class failed. But I had a lot of fun. What's that?
Did you fail? Of course you did.
I did not fail.
What?
Interestingly enough, guess what grade I got?
A.
An A.
What the?
Because on the day of the final, he had maps up around the room, and he had the questions on the page, and he had to go up to each map and answer these questions. So at one point, he comes up to me and he says, Mr. Stanley, here's a talking about. He's a taller guy, and he says, have you ever heard of the law of reciprocity? And I said, reciprocity means that you kind of get what you give. And he says, yes, law of reciprocity. I have appreciated having you in my class this year. You may leave, you have an A. I'm like, I have an A. He says, you have an A, you may leave. Thank you, Professor. I wasn't doing it for the A. I looked at it and said, this class sucks. I think I was passing, but I was putting very little effort into it. But I wasn't there for grades. I was there to learn, and I wasn't going to learn much in this class anyway, and I just thought it was entertaining, so I stirred the pot. He took it to me that I really was backing him up on it. And a weird thing happened, I got an A in class. Sometimes you find some meaning in the suffering. Sometimes the meaning is, it's just funny. Have you ever been so screwed in life that it was funny? Sometimes you sit there and go like, ah, you're laughing. Nothing else to say, it's just like, ah. Sometimes that happens in life. Yeah, I remember taking a class one time, and it was an upper division class, and there's this guy who's sitting at kind of like the desk, like this little further apart. He's sitting at the desk next to me, put it that way. And as we start the final exam, and this is one of those classes you may have heard of when you're in college, that you might take a class where your whole grade is based off of one test, or two tests. You'll take a midterm, and then you'll take a final, and your whole grade is based off of just two tests. So it was one of those kinds of deals. And there's a guy sitting next to me, and he starts laughing. But he's like holding his breath down because he's in the middle of class. And so, you know how when you try not to laugh, it almost makes it worse?
Yeah.
Because he's like red. I look over at him, he's just like red-faced, holding his face. He's like, trying to laugh, and I go, what's so funny? I want to know what's so funny. And he looks at me and says, I don't know any of this. And he said, I got a C on the first one. I'm going to fail this one. I have to retake the class, and I'm not going to graduate. He thought that was funny. Not that it was funny, but he was so screwed, it was funny. Because not graduating meant he was going to have to put himself off until the following school year, which was going to cost him several $1,000s just to retake one class. Because he didn't study, because he wasn't ready for it. Well, that was funny, Now, is that the meaning that we should derive from a class? Probably not. Probably not. But it is a meaning. It is a purpose. And I guess whatever kind of gets you to show up for it in the first place. So if there's a meaning in life, not that there is, but if there is a meaning in life, then there has to be a meaning in our suffering. Because suffering is such a massive part of our lives that we cannot, you can't take it. If you took all the suffering out of your life, an 80-year-old would have lived, what, 6 years? Because there's so much suffering. In other words, suffering takes up so much of your life, so much of your time, that if you removed it from your life wouldn't be very much time at all. It's mostly that thing. It's mostly the suffering part. It's kind of like, think of this. It's 10:30 right now. time do you guys wake up? Roughly, somebody else.
And the 5.
5 o'clock. So you wake up at 5. So you've been awake for 5.5 hours this morning so far. What's the most exciting thing you've done in the last 5.5 hours?
On my phone.
Play on your phone. Has anybody done anything exciting yet today?
Be here with you.
Be here with me. That's exciting, yeah.
I probably shouldn't say this, I don't know, some people are probably going to weird out, but I had this shit earlier, and my friend, I posted on my story because I got my close friends, because I spam my close friends or whatever, and then my friend was like, yo, where you at right now? I was like, 3rd floor. He's like, alright, I'm on my way. So he comes in.
It's a team effort.
Yeah.
Hold it down, I'll be there for you.
Shitting. So he comes in, I hear the light turn on, and I hear his like stupid ass laugh, because it's a pretty hyena laugh. And then he's like, and then like one of our other friends came in and was like, yo, what's up? And I heard him wrap him up. And then, okay, like 10 minutes later, we're just having a conversation, you know, the usual, when you have to shut school.
What would be the usual conversation when you're crafting in school?
I don't want to know.
Actually,
I do. I want to know.
We didn't have any conversation, he just started banging on my door, he's like, hey, can I come in? And then he walked over and looked at me.
What the?
Alright, not some weird shit.
No.
We're like brothers, so it's not as weird.
Oh.
No, it's cool, man. We're like brothers. Brothers do that?
So I looked to my left, right? I'm like, alright, he's like, are you gonna finish? And I was like, yeah, I'm almost done.
No.
He's waiting for the finale.
So I looked to my left, right? I was like, bro, can you not leave? There's like no toilet paper left. So I was like, what? Okay, there's 3 stalls in the 3rd floor bathroom. One was taken on the left, and then on my right, I think there's some dude in there. He has a backpack on the ground. It was really unsanitary in my opinion.
Right.
He wasn't saying a word. He was like dead silent. So I think he was one of those guys that like, I know sometimes some people just stay in the bathroom.
Crying themselves.
They just need that time or whatever, you know?
Understood.
So I was like,
Wait, so these are people you don't even know. So they're in there while all this is going on. They have to-
Yeah.
Oh man, poor guys are in there just going.
I
Maybe he's terrified. Someone's gonna poke over and ask him, "You gonna finish?"
I was telling him like, bro, let us focus, you know? And then anyway, so I'm like, yo, can you hand me toilet paper? He's like, yeah, sure, I got you. So instead of handing over like a normal friend under the stall, he threw it over the stall. And he's like, yo, here. So I was like, what are you doing?
Like a streamer.
Yeah, just handed it to me. And then he was like, alright, I got you. So I was like, okay, can you give me some more? And he threw it over and it got on the ground.
Oh,
And then he's like,
sanitary.
I was like, what are you doing? You know? And I was like, can you give me more? And he's like, bro, but there's someone on the ground right there. I was like, dude, no. And then
Bad you want.
he just gave me toilet paper, I finished, and then we went to class.
That's very
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
Someone at the AT show.
How many of y'all were entertained by that story, at least in some little way?
I actually was. That's
That's a
impressive.
pretty good story. Oh man, imagine if every crap you took was as interesting and exciting as that.
What you gonna do, huh? Yeah.
But by the way, that is exactly the point. How much of your life is taken up by the mundane, by the walking to school, by going to the bathroom, by the taking a shower, by the little tiny things that are just, you know, that they consume your day, versus how many times you have those little spikes of excitement that happen, you know? Those little spikes of excitement that happen, we like to record those and throw them up on our social media and go, this is my life! Woo! Well, we forget about the part when you're sitting there on the toilet struggling because your friend can't throw your toilet. You know? But imagine if you could somehow find a way to make even those mundane parts of your life interesting and exciting. How exciting and interesting would your life be? Because that is most of your life, right? Those little, you know what I mean by the mundane? Like the day-to-day things that are boring and we don't think much of. Like, for example, I wonder if, how many of you guys walked to school? How many of you remember your walk to school this morning? Or did you just like stumble out of your house, then all of a sudden you show up at the gate and go like, I guess it's school. Or next thing you knew, you're sitting in your desk at the first period. In other words, you missed the last half hour or 40 minutes of your life because it wasn't interesting. There's nothing going on. I mean, you have to walk to school anyway. You might as well find some meaning in it, find something interesting in it, find a way to make it exciting. You know? And so, since we have to live this life anyway, we might as well find a way to make it meaningful. Because if not, at the end of the day, think about how much of your day today you've already lost because it was mundane and you just can't remember. You know, the man over here took a dump, and this is something that we're all going to remember. You know, if I run across you in a couple of years, I'll say, remember that story you told when you were, you know, the most memorable dump in history. Because it's something that's been, and by the way, one of the reasons it's funny to all of us is because I wonder how many of us have experienced things like that, at least Meaning, I wonder how many of you have been in the bathroom when other weird stuff has been happening. Other people are having the stories you're talking about. That people are, cutting whatever and going in there and doing stuff. Or you might be sitting going, this is weird. Well, yeah, it's weird. Weird means strange. I mean, actually, weird, the root of the word weird actually means fate. Weird means fate. But when we use it, we mean it to mean that it's strange. And yeah, it is strange. But wouldn't it be interesting if the strange was not so strange in your life? If the strange was more common? That'd be an interesting life. Maybe it'd be a meaningful life. Any questions? Comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? If I see you guys in a rhetoric class, we look at Viktor Frankl, we study him a bit. He's got a really fascinating story. Like I said, he's a Holocaust survivor. So he's got a really fascinating story about his background. So